All right, welcome back to another episode of Scene Interpretation. I am Dr. Sophia Murphy. I'm a licensed mental health clinician here in the state of Arizona, and I am probably, I'm going to say, the biggest fan of movies because I just want to pretend that I am, and I like using a little hyperbole. And I have just been having a blast hanging out with cool people, talking about cool movies. And right now, we're keeping the streak alive where I get the joy of talking to someone who's just watched what I would consider a classic for the first time. And I think we're really rocking and rolling so far. This is episode 8, and I have found 8 amazing people who have seen what I consider 8 of the best movies for the first time. So today I'm hanging out with Tracy, and I am so thrilled because we picked, I think, a banger of a movie for today. But yeah, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and we'll just kind of get into it.
So my name is Tracy. I'm a physical therapist, and I also do a podcast. So I do
Cool.
I do the State of Healthcare podcast, which again I've annoyed people for guests and things like that. And I thought I love movies, and I should pay it forward. And
I
since
love it.
we do workout things together, I
Yep.
was like, I'll just message her and see if I can do this. And then when I was going through, it was kind of fun to just be like, what have I not seen that would be surprising?
Yes.
And let's talk about it. So yeah, so
I love it.
that's where we're at.
And I feel so lucky because I also want to definitely promote your podcast later on too. But just to have someone who's been doing this already, but then also like kind of switching the focus to a different topic.
Right.
And then, yeah, filling my cup and giving you the opportunity to pick your brain for a little bit. So today, drum roll, we are going to be talking about Fight Club. This could go so many ways. I think it stands pretty high on my list just from a storytelling perspective and what it pulled off. And, I think there's just so much kind of lore at this point that if you somehow made it to this point and don't know, like, really what the movie's about, it's just a fun ride. Like,
Right.
so much happens. And then we can really dive into some of the pros and cons of messaging and what it's really arguing for or against. And I think it was made for a podcast like this where we're combining like psychological aspects with cinema. And again, those pros and cons of like the power of what movies are communicating.
Right.
So I guess kind of just to kick us off, tell me a little bit about just like your relationship to Fight Club, what you knew about it, and just kind of what you were aware of.
So here's the hard part is that when Fight Club first came out, then it was everybody's like, we don't talk about Fight Club, right? And then the problem was somebody gave the ending away.
It was Rosie. Oh, I thought you were going to say the big news thing that happened.
Oh no,
Personally. Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
So someone gave we could talk about, but yeah. And so, and I'm like, well, why am I going to watch this then?
Oh,
So again,
yeah.
I know it would be, and so now going back and being like,
Sure.
as I'm watching it, then I think I'm watching it from a different perspective of being like looking for
Absolutely.
clues of whatever to be like, wait a minute, but I think also if I had seen it and then been like, what?
Yeah.
So I think for me, I was like, well, why would I watch this then?
Sure.
I already have all the lines. I know how this ends, but I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, To All the Boys I Loved Before.
No.
And so, or actually, yeah, it is a movie. So in the movie, it's kind of like they're putting together this fake relationship, and she has a 16 Candles reference, and he doesn't get it. So she's like, "We need to watch that." And he's like,
Yeah.
and he makes a Fight Club reference, and she doesn't get it. So he's like, "Put that down too." Like, so they have to watch each other's
Cute.
movies
Okay.
to understand the references. And
Yeah.
he's like, "What do you mean you know?" He's like, "We don't talk about it like Fight Club." And she's like, "What?" And so I was like, "Oh, yeah." So then I always just thought about it. I'm like, "Well, I already know how that plays out."
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I should watch this and see what the hype is about.
Yeah, and just maybe get the full
Mhm.
picture, even though unfortunately, my heart breaks to know that someone
I
ruined,
know.
I think, one of the best twists of all
Mhm.
cinematic history.
Yeah, right up there, I think a little bit like Sixth Sense.
Yes, I would say that too. Like that was a mind-blowing
Uh-huh.
experience to see Sixth Sense in the theater
Right.
and not have any idea where this was going.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh shit. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So I thought you were going to reference it was like very big news. Rosie O'Donnell had her TV show at the time, and she was talking on the show about how for her, I guess it was very like disturbing and she couldn't sleep. And so she was basically telling her audience not to see the movie while it was in theaters
Oh shit.
and gave away the twist on her show. And so it's like still, considered kind of one of the worst faux
Right.
pas that we know
Right.
in like the movie world. That it's someone with such a big TV personality and
Yeah,
following.
to do
Obviously, we had
that.
no social media yet, but
Right.
she had a lot of viewers. She just spilled it right there. And I think it might have been like right after opening weekend. Like it was a
Maybe
big
it was
deal.
Rosie O'Donnell that ruined it for me, and I just don't
Don't remember.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So luckily I didn't have that experience and I was able to see the movie and not know where it was going.
Okay.
And I think this is one of the few that we've talked about so far. I didn't see it right away, not because it was made before I was born or not because I was too little, but just because I didn't think I would care about a movie about men
Mhm.
who want to be in a fight club.
Right.
And I think part of the reason was because of how it was marketed.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was doing some research too, like this was really cross marketed with a lot of like WWE,
Mhm.
UFC at the time, things that, no offense to anybody, but I don't care about.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was just like, why do I want to watch guys beat each other up?
Yeah.
And so luckily I hadn't had the end spoiled. So by the time I saw it probably in my 20s,
Mhm.
when I was really kind of on my own, becoming a therapist journey, like learning about psychology, I just loved it for the pure ride
Yeah.
of like what a concept of this man's like psyche being split to try to find his identity in kind of the parts of the culture I was already pretty critical of. So like that's
Right.
where I think there's this interesting like love criticism relationship of
Mhm.
the dialogue and the writing and everything just because I don't know really what it stands for, but it
Uh-huh.
makes some interesting arguments.
Right. And I also have to say, like, watching it now is interesting for me. This is probably going to come out anti-patriarchal, and so I'm just going to make
Hey,
statements.
I
But
think that's fine.
in a world now where we're confronting so much of men's loneliness,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
crisis, right? And it's not that I'm unsympathetic. Like again, but again, in so much of the men loneliness crisis, and
Yeah.
so much of the flashback, and just all the things, and it's also interesting in a world we live now that this movie also has a anti-consumerism.
Yes.
And now we live in a world where we are surrounded by just billionaires and this product
Yes.
stuff, and the average person can't pay for things.
Yes.
And this message about we're not our stuff and like this and that. So I feel like the messages still apply.
Oh, for sure.
And then and so again, as I was watching it, I was also being really, I was probably not as nice to the men. I was like, look at these men just falling in line and just looking for
Yes.
someone to boss their ass around,
Yes.
And so, and then I'm like, this is how we solve the crisis. We just put them all together and let them train, and they don't need us.
They just take care of each other.
Yeah, because the interesting part was there was a comment in there when they were like, I think it was Brad Pitt's character made a comment about like, well, we were raised by women, so maybe we don't need any more women in our lives. And I was like, oh, and I've definitely seen
Yeah.
sentiments like that now.
Yes.
And so I'm like, well, fine, just leave us alone, like go in your fight club, beat each other
I
up.
know. We're not going to miss you as much as you think we might miss.
Yeah. So again, I think problem now is I'm watching it with the skeptical eye of things.
Yeah. But we're in a very interesting time and space culturally. So I think there's a lot of validity to that. And I think maybe how I've made my own sense of the movie, which doesn't make me right, is I think it's a really interesting two-sided coin
Yeah.
of the criticisms of consumerism and capitalism are the parts I love the most, really. And so I think, Ed Norton's character, I think we refer to him as like the narrator because they're the
Right.
same people. The two sides of him, right, is really struggling with this hollowness of
Right.
I've accumulated all these things. Like I've reached this certain point. I have a good life. I make money. I have the entire IKEA catalog in my house and I feel nothing.
Right.
And that part to me, I think is incredibly applicable today.
Right. He got the American dream.
Exactly. And where did it get him? He's miserable, right?
Right.
And not well, clearly,
Yeah.
mentally well. And that part I think is almost ageless and if anything has escalated. Because
Right.
now it's not a tangible IKEA magazine.
Yeah.
It's social media, it's every streaming service, it's every ad that's just like pushed down your throat over and over again. To me, the consumerism has only gone up.
Yeah.
And the sort of mental health cost of that has only gone up. So that part I really love. Now, this idea that the only way that the men can cope is to go to their like primal violent instinct is where I think it falls apart for me to an
Right.
extent. Like I
Yeah.
get the idea that at least violence helps them feel something. And I can almost jive with that. I think there is this piece of like people want to put themselves in dangerous situations or
To
take
feel
risks.
alive.
Exactly. To just have something to grasp onto. the other part, I guess it's more like an Oreo, not two sides of a coin. The other side, though, that I think redeems it is it's a cautionary tale of how easily people fall in line,
Right.
and a movement that's really maybe designed to give you purpose and connection
Yeah.
warps into something really twisted
Mhm.
and becomes dangerous. And like you said, like they're just robots. Like
Yeah.
even, the narrator can't pull it back.
Yeah.
And so it's the sandwich of it, I think, that I
Mhm.
really love. It's the middle that's a little to me.
Right.
But I do think we're seeing this ramification of like, you could argue, if
Mhm.
I'm being generous, social media was designed to maybe give us some connection, to like,
Right.
again, help us in a certain way. And now we've created this monster where people are just like mindlessly scrolling and consuming
Yeah.
and believing and not even questioning.
And also feeling bad about themselves constantly because
Yes.
there's the comparison,
Yeah.
the having to keep up. It's a lot
Yeah.
of like constant on you, right?
Absolutely.
And so I feel like for people that it just feeds you in a loop of feeling bad and
Yes.
being like, well, I need to do this. I need to have
Yes.
this. And so it keeps you there,
I
right?
totally agree with you. If I buy this thing, then I won't feel the
Mhm.
feelings and then I'll be better. But
Right.
really, we just know we're numbing or masking the
Mhm.
problem in less than ideal ways.
Right. And that was and there was one funny line when they were on the bus together,
Yeah.
and there was like a picture of a Calvin Klein model, and Brad Pitt's like, "You think that's manly? That's how you stay in shape?" But then you see his physique, and I'm like,
Yes.
"Really, sir?
Right.
Really?"
You look just like that. So what are
Yeah.
we supposed to take
I
from
mean, this is
this?
prime Brad Pitt time,
Yes,
right?
for
Like
sure.
him, and again, I got to give Ed Norton his moment. I finally, like later, he was
Yeah.
finally more ripped, right?
Yeah.
But like, it was just funny that they were almost the embodiment of what they were mocking.
Yes, and that's why I try to give it some grace that that was probably intentional and again, maybe a
Mhm.
little highbrow.
Yeah.
And when again you think about like,
Mhm.
does the average person watching this
Mhm.
take it as like a recipe and dogma? Or
Right.
do they take it
Yes.
as like something they want to break apart and
Mhm.
look at all the pieces and fine tooth comb it?
Right.
And that's I think the danger sometimes of making content like this is
Right.
you cannot control how it's gonna be
Mhm.
interpreted. I think ideally, your point is the point,
Right.
is
That
like
they
we're presenting this, but really we're making fun of it,
right,
where
because then
someone yeah,
Brad Pitt's got no shirt on and he looks just like the Calvin Klein model. He probably
exactly.
looks better than the Calvin Klein,
Exactly.
but he's like, "That's not manly." And I'm like, "Well," so I guess on some level, it's interesting to me because I feel like every man loves Fight Club or whatever. But then I'm
Yes.
like, are you just embracing it because it's that, what reason are they in love with this movie
I think
for?
that's the key question.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you kind of tied right into one of the things I was going to ask, which is
Mhm.
both that the film has been kind of widely over the years now, both celebrated as a masterpiece and
Mhm.
criticized for glorifying the exact things it's
Mhm.
satirizing. So I'm just curious now that you've watched it, like where do you think you landed and how well do you think the movie maybe made a distinction?
I would have to say, like, I spent a lot of the movie kind of like annoyed at Edward Norton,
Sure.
but I could feel his thing, right? Like,
Mm,
so I love what I do for a living.
yeah.
And I know that there's times I'm burnt out and this and that, but I understand how a lot of people are in like, you're in the corporate, you sit in the thing, you
Yeah.
buy the things, you get in the wheelhouse, right? And again, my life isn't perfect, but
Sure.
I do get up and have joy about what I get to do.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I spent a lot of, and it felt like it was like, at first I felt like it was like the movie Office Space gone wrong, right? Like instead of him just being like, I'm going to chill out with my friends and not
Right.
go to work, he's like, I'm going to turn this into toxic masculinity.
100%.
But again, what I was also examining was his whole thing with his parental relations. Like he
Yeah.
didn't have a positive father figure role.
Right.
He's like, my dad didn't want me. Tyler didn't want me.
Yes.
So he keeps seeing that, and I think he's trying to create what he visions as this perfect man.
Yes.
So I felt like it was sort of a criticism,
Mhm.
right? Because even with these, they show this man, they glorify this fighting, it gives them a purpose, but then it just starts to go very dark very quick,
Right.
right? And so I feel like if people watched it, and again, everyone can interpret a movie how they want,
Right. And
but
they will.
yeah, and that's their right, right?
Yeah.
But I felt like it showed, then it just started to, because even when he found this moment to be alive, he
Yeah.
still wasn't happy.
Correct.
He
It
was
still ended up in the same place.
Yeah, he was still constantly
Yep.
insecure about his relationship with Tyler.
Yeah.
He was still insecure about all the things, and he kind of felt happy living in his little shithole doing his Fight Club thing, but then there was constant insecurity, constant,
Yes.
like, so he never really,
Mhm.
until kind of the moment at the end where he, like, can find peace.
Right.
And then I did a deep dive into, like, the novel that it was based on.
Yeah, which I've still never read, and it's been on my radar
Mhm.
forever.
And the novel ends differently than the movie.
Really?
So
Okay.
in the novel, he actually ends up in a psych ward. And so
Oh,
it's like he visions that this happens, but he's actually in the psych ward being visited by members of the Project Mayhem. And then
that's interesting.
and then there was this is why I went nerd out style.
Oh,
But
I love it. This is my favorite.
there was a comic book release that was like a sequel
I didn't know that either. Now
to,
I wanna get my hands on that.
like Fight Club 2, but it's told from Tyler's perspective.
Fascinating.
So, and it's like
Okay.
him trying to, Edward Norton's character is living somewhere else with Marla or wherever, it's Tyler trying to get back into his life and
Interesting.
take back over, and he goes by Edward Norton goes by Sebastian now, so it's kind of told that way. So in my head with this, I feel like they nailed it in the fact that, like, yes, people are unhappy and they're trying to
Mhm.
find a thing. Even if it's like what Twilight, where Bella would put herself in this dangerous situation
Right,
so she
for
could
Edward
see
to come
Edward.
save
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
Just to feel something.
Yes.
But then it showed that what he picked was a destructive method. So
Right.
ultimately, I feel like the message of the toxic masculinity,
Yeah.
it showed that both systems weren't working. There needed to be
Right.
something. We didn't need to be this ultra just follow the rules consumerism,
Agreed.
but to do we don't listen to any, because even this message that Brad Pitt's character gave was like, you need to let go, you need to do this. But all that channeled into was wanting to control people.
Well, yeah, it basically just made them his followers
Hmm.
blindly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he kept wanting Ed Norton to just let go.
Right.
But I'm like, it just wanted all these followers, right? They just
Right.
had to submit. And I'm like, well, that's
Yes.
not an answer either. Like,
Right. Well, and I think your point is really key, though, at least in my mind, is when we don't understand our distress or our malaise or our
mm-hmm.
kind of longings, then we're grasping. And I
Right.
think you could make an argument that the toxic masculinity part is like the symptom
Yeah.
of the issue as opposed to the
Mhm.
issue itself. Right. So
Yeah.
because men aren't taught any
Right.
options, it's
Uh-huh.
either this like conformity or this like hyper masculinity that, spoiler alert, ends up being conformity again.
Yeah.
It's still a prison, it's just a
Mhm.
different prison.
Yeah.
And so I like to look at it as like, I think they actually did a pretty good job
Mhm.
satirizing it. But I think you have to want to ask those questions to pick
Right.
up on the satire and to
Right.
pick up on the criticism. Otherwise, people just look at it as like a blueprint for, oh, this is the answer to my problems, as I just turn into the other extreme.
Men
And
need to be men,
I think that's what we're seeing on a larger cultural
Uh-huh.
level right now too, is like I try to balance both sides of that because a lot of my work is with men. And I
Right.
never planned to work in spaces
Uh-huh.
where I only worked with men. And
Okay.
most of my caseload is men now. And I have
Interesting.
fallen in love with it
Uh-huh.
because I see the gaps in what they've
Mhm.
been given as options. And
Right.
I see the prison of I have to either be this or that. And I have no other
Mhm.
choices. I'm either a
Right.
pussy or I'm a badass. And it's like,
Right.
okay, and what else
Right.
could we create to
Mhm.
give you actual autonomy and a sense of self-efficacy and
Mhm.
self-esteem and like the full range of being a human,
Right.
not these just two different prisons. And
Right.
so I think maybe it also lands different for me now because
Mhm.
I want to give them some sort of perspective of like conformism isn't the better option when it's just a different form of conformity.
Right.
Like you're allowed to pick whatever is going to actually make you happy and be that person
Uh-huh.
without this like reemergence of this toxic masculine shell that like we're back at this like influencer level. It just, oh, it makes my skin crawl.
Well, it was interesting to me the part where it, like, also was weird that I'm like, Jared Leto made Meatloaf. What is this movie? And then when like Meatloaf's character gets killed and they
Yeah,
drag him in and they're like, we don't have names in Project Mayhem.
right.
But then he's like, no, this is this human,
Right.
right?
We have to remember.
And then they're like chanting that. And he's like,
Mhm.
no, like, and just how much they had just like given up.
Yes,
So I feel like as humans, we all want a sense of belonging.
absolutely.
We need a community.
Yes.
But I feel like women have found maybe more positive areas. And
I
again, I'm
agree.
probably just
Yeah.
judging because I was coming in with my skeptical eye. But I also feel like for men, there are less
Yeah.
options.
I agree. I think that is the consequence of them being given only
Mm-hmm.
sort of like two ways to exist. They
Right.
either have to be like the kind of loser guy
Uh-huh.
who is looked down on or too
Right.
nice or nice guys
Mm-hmm.
finish last. They're kind of a pushover, or they're
Right.
that like hyper aggressive, toxic masculinity guy. And I think that is the exact point, is that like either one is not the only option.
Right.
I I don't think they're socialized and raised to believe
Uh-huh.
there are other pathways, where I do think, I mean, even though, trust me, women are pretty low on the totem pole,
Yeah.
we are socialized to at least lean on each other and get
Mhm.
that support and that to be okay. So it's a little easier to create those spaces and to create, again, like movements of,
Uh-huh.
hey, we're more than just this word, or we're more than just this
Mhm.
role. And I think men have not had that opportunity, and they're so behind in that. And I'd like to think that there's a little bit of that happening now. And
Right.
not to like put it all on me. And I'm
Uh-huh.
blessed to be in spaces where I think
You
there are those
making a
dialogues.
difference.
Yeah. And there are those
Mhm.
conversations of like, you're a person too.
Right.
You're more than just this one identity that you were told was your only choice.
Well, and I do feel like the Barbie movie tried to give that message,
Yes.
but I think the problem was is people were so like, it's anti-patriarchy,
Right.
whereas I feel like I loved that movie. I loved Ryan
Yes.
Gosling's performance.
Me too.
Do I think that maybe Margot Robbie should have gotten more credit too? Yes.
Of course.
But I
There's our point right there.
right, yeah, once again. But do I think that the message was that one society or the other favoring hurt both?
Yes, 100%.
And
It's a
they
great
needed to
comparison.
each find their own thing,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I love, that it wasn't like Ken was just there to serve Barbie or Barbie was there to serve Ken.
Yeah.
They each needed their own pathway. And
Yes, and I'm just like, my
Mhm.
cylinders are firing now. I love that you brought Barbie into this
Mhm.
conversation, because I do think one of the key takeaways from that was that coming from the like hyper matriarchal Barbie world into the real world,
Uh-huh.
Barbie crumbles and
Yes.
Ken thrives
Yes.
until he doesn't.
Yeah.
Like suddenly he feels powerful and important and special in a toxic way,
Yes.
that when he finally has to confront it, they both have such a beautiful conversation around how she really wasn't treating him well either.
Right.
And his reaction to that wasn't better.
Yeah.
There had to be another
Mhm.
option. And so I don't think I would have ever thought to cross reference Fight Club
What
with Barbie, but
Barbie,
you
but
nailed it. I really think you nailed it. That's like really powerful to me.
well, and it's interesting because as much as I feel like women, I mean, to be honest, I think part of the thing I realized what I've been doing when I talk about my podcast is there's so little research on women,
True.
right? And so just from a healthcare perspective, right?
Yeah.
Someone just sent me something before I got here that a lot of menopause research had been done on men. And I'm like,
Yep.
the fuck?
Makes no
Right?
sense.
Yeah. And so I'm like, really? So as much as I'm like, I would like them to just get a taste back of what it's like,
Sure.
that doesn't ultimately help anything either.
Agreed.
You know,
Yeah.
do I want the things fixed for us? Would I like better research for actually dealing with women's issues?
Absolutely.
Yes. But I know that if I'm like at the expense of men being told, tortured this
Yeah.
way, I'm just creating a toxic environment the
Yeah,
other way.
we're overcorrecting.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're a fan of Brene Brown at all.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan. I talk about
Uh-huh.
her in sessions all the time, and I
Mhm.
teach about her to my own supervisees and
Uh-huh.
clinicians. But in one of her famous TED Talks, where she's talking about how famous she was getting,
Right.
and she was doing all these book signings, and she had really like made a name for herself. And she's, at a book event and signing and signing. And this man comes up and
Uh-huh.
basically says, I think it's interesting that you don't talk about men. And she says something to the effect of like, well, I don't study men. And he
Uh-huh.
says to her, that's convenient.
Oh.
And she talks about how that was such a light bulb for her, that even
Uh-huh.
in her own research,
Right.
in her attempt, I think, to even the playing field, she was doing all her research on women and
Mhm.
writing about women
Right.
and not addressing any of the consequences of the exact same system on men.
Right.
And his comments to her were like, you tell us to, you're preaching vulnerability and you're preaching
Mhm.
connection. And he said, the books that you signed were for my like 3 daughters and my wife, and
Right.
they would rather I die on my horse than ever see me fall off. So
Oh.
how am I supposed to use any of the things you're preaching
Uh-huh.
when you haven't ever thought about how it would apply to people like me? And I think
Right.
about that a lot. To
Uh-huh.
your exact point that like as we try to
Mhm.
right the ship and address patriarchy and the
Mhm.
very, very real tangible consequences to people socialized as women, how do we
Right.
not then just create the monster in the other direction? And I think that's such a good thing to think about.
Have you ever read the book? It's called The Power.
No.
So not giving away all the things. It was an Amazon series for a little bit, but essentially women at puberty start developing the ability to use electrical energy.
Oh, interesting.
So then they start, and then they can activate this gland in older women. So the
Yeah.
power starts to shift because women
Okay.
can essentially just electrocute the shit out of you if they want to, right? And so it's told in this like weird historical perspective where it's like, can you ever believe there was a time when men were in charge? Now it's a
Interesting.
very like it shows the evolution into a matriarchal society because
Right.
women hold all the power.
Huh.
But as they start to go, they become just as awful as the system they were fighting against.
And to me, I think that's where we can give this movie some credit is I
Mhm.
do think it was attempting that same argument.
Mhm.
And maybe not even attempting is fair. I think that was the argument it was making.
Right.
And it's not hard for, again, like a lonely group of men to see this movie and
Uh-huh.
misinterpret it as, again, like
This is
the
what we need to do.
solution is this sort
Mhm.
of anarchy, fascist, other extreme, as if we haven't just now recreated the problem.
Right, because you see how it was red pill men and all the
Yeah,
things
everything
and
that's happening
the
now.
angry men online because again, they don't have that guidance.
Right.
They aren't shown a different way.
Yep. And it isn't working really for any of us. So we
Yeah.
grasp at straws of like what the
Mhm.
next option would be.
Right.
Oh,
So
this is great. I love it. Um, let's see, where do I want to go? We just got into so much
no, I'm
great
sorry. I took us
stuff.
on a
No,
puppy
please
time.
don't apologize. I love this. So kind of in this space, after watching this, did anything shift for you in how you think about the relationship between masculinity, pain, and the need to feel something?
At first when I first watched it, because I was being skeptical of like,
Mhm.
why do men just have to fight each other to
Yeah.
feel manly,
Yep.
right? But again, I think sometimes people, like we talked about, need to feel something.
Yep.
There's like it's ironically a song with Avril Lavigne where it says anything, or it's called like anything but ordinary, and
Mhm.
she's like, there's lines in there where I just need to feel alive.
Yeah.
And so for me with this, I just watching it, I was thinking they were embracing that stereotype that men have
Yes.
to fight each other and they have to
Yeah.
be brutal and they have to get that and they just have to feel, and even the scene where he's like confronting his boss trying to get the
Oh,
paychecks
God.
when he just punching the shit out of
So
himself,
upsetting. Yeah.
right? And I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if I could do that.
Oh, I could not do that.
And I was like, but
Mhm.
again, I'm also at this point not in a crisis where I need
True.
to feel something, right? So I was
Yes.
like, what? So I guess on a level, I feel like I think they took that, but I like we kind of talked about that they took that stereotype
Yep.
and they showed like this is I think if you look at it, this is what men think they need,
Right.
but it just creates a worse world in the long run.
Agreed. And I was thinking about it too from the lens of because men are socialized with such a narrow
Mhm.
set of choices, not just in identity, but also in experience. So I think a
Right.
lot about like it's a stereotype and it comes out for a reason, which is like
Uh-huh.
men are really only allowed to be angry or
Uh-huh.
neutral.
Right.
And I even have like the feelings
Mhm.
wheel pillow that I
Oh,
use in all my
uh-huh,
sessions. And we know like
uh-huh,
there's more feelings than you can even fit on a pillow. But
mhm,
if you're socialized to think you're allowed to have one,
right.
what does that do to your range of experience as a human being? And so I
Yeah,
think a lot about like, if anger is the only feeling you've been taught is valid, then
mhm,
violence is the perfect execution to
right.
feel anything.
Yeah,
Because instead of having thousands of emotional experiences, I basically have to just be like, here or
uh-huh,
I'm full of rage.
right.
And so it's like, it's almost setting them up for failure again.
Mhm.
Like it's the easiest pathway to the one way I've been told I'm allowed to be emotional.
Well, it's always interesting too, because I think we also approach people, like, if they're,
Yes.
being weird with you, you automatically assume they're angry at you.
Right.
But maybe they've had a shitty day.
Correct.
Maybe they're disappointed in you. Maybe
Yes.
they are sad.
Yep.
Maybe, but we will always, and I realize I do that to myself. If someone's doing a thing, I'm like, are you mad at
Right.
me? Right. And
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't realize that I don't give grace to people.
Yeah.
The irony being, um, as like I approach perimenopause is that
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like I'm either like neutral or rage monster. So I was
Yeah.
like, shit, this is where
Yeah.
I'm at. But again, I do think that because again, it was like either Edward Norton felt nothing
Right.
and he just went on.
Yeah.
Even as he's seeing all these terrible things in his job,
Yep.
right? He had to confront that people were being like burned alive. And
Right.
he's like helping sweep it under the carpet.
Yep. And doing his little just like paperwork
Mhm.
assessment to like make his decisions for
Yeah,
payouts.
using like a freaking formula of
Yes.
determining things about people's lives.
Absolutely.
And so it's probably storing all these horrors, right?
Yes.
And he's thinking he's doing all of the stuff he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And and he's literally just, and it was interesting that his first attempt was to go to support groups, right?
To feel something.
Yeah.
Yes.
To have a connection with other humans.
Yeah. He had to fake a disease
Mhm.
to go to a place where then he could find a pseudo form of connection
Mhm.
and allow himself to cry,
Right.
seeing other people's pain and trauma, and then
Uh-huh.
sleep for the first time in like 6 months.
Right.
Like, what kind of commentary is that on a man's range of options?
Right. Well, and then it was just interesting that they tried to feed it in that the men actually felt better than when they were like feeding each other up
Right.
and all that
Right.
stuff.
Yes.
And then it's also interesting that Helena Bonham Carter's
Yes.
character, her being in the support group, ruined it for him.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
that was his thing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so, and again, it was all these dysfunctional ways for
Yeah.
him to try to find something, find a
Yeah.
purpose, he was battling essentially mental illness.
Literally.
Uh-huh.
Just trying to survive, but not being able to address any of the things that were really going on.
Did you ever see the movie Joker?
Yes.
Okay, just remember.
So dark.
So it reminded me a little bit of that movie.
Yes.
Because especially half the time I'm like, is Helena Bonham Carter or like an actual character?
Sure.
Like, is she a figment of imagination?
Yeah.
Where like, because even in the Joker movie, like he kind of imagined that girl was his girlfriend, and
For a while.
yeah,
Mhm.
and for a lot, like in that, I also felt like there was this failure of this guy with this mental
Yes.
illness,
Yes.
right? And so
And turning into fascist anarchist leader, right?
yeah,
And people just
almost by
blindly
accident.
doing anything he wants them to do
Mhm.
because they're also feeling disenfranchised or left behind or
Mhm.
insert word.
And to be honest, as terrible as it sounds watching the Joker movie, he didn't really kill a lot of people in that him like
Right.
and I'm like, well, Robert De Niro was kind of annoying, So I was like, he didn't kill the one guy because
Right.
he just was like, you were always kind to me and he left him.
Yes, he
You
just
know?
leaves him after scaring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, to be honest, like he's not handling it too terrible.
What's those weird shades of gray? Because even in this story,
Uh-huh.
Tyler, narrator, he doesn't really kill anybody. He
Yeah.
sets up the scenarios to have these, again, foot soldiers do these horrible things by
Mhm.
blowing up all these buildings. And
Right.
some people, I'm sure, were injured and killed.
Right.
It's sort of like, again, a less thought of consequence around like a mission statement.
Well, and even when he pulled a gun on that one kid or whatever, it was to send him back to school. So you see
Right.
where he had all the like the driver's license and that
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So it almost felt like in his mind he was doing some good for the world, right?
I
He
do
was
think that's
freeing
part of the
them.
argument.
Mhm.
Yeah, is that how quickly it escalated
Yeah.
to, again, mayhem being kind of code word for fascism.
Right.
Where it's like maybe somewhere in there,
Mhm.
there was a kernel of a purpose
Mhm.
that just got swept away by, again, unprocessed trauma and rage and
Mhm.
disenfranchisement. And again, feeling left behind or feeling unseen, that the only other option was chaos.
Right. Well, and if you look at it, because it's essentially it was Edward Norton's character doing this,
Of course.
right? Is that he probably was trying to free himself. So
Yeah.
he probably thought he was helping other people.
I do think that's part of the argument of the
And
story.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then he realized too late that he had just created a almost worse system.
Oh, absolutely. And even when he's trying to like call the police
Yeah.
and the police are like, yes, sir, like
Uh-huh.
Project Mayhem, like it's just like a code word now. And he's like, no, I'm trying to stop this.
Yeah.
And it's unstoppable at this point. Once
Mhm.
he's even sort of, you could say, brought his two identities back together.
Right.
And he's able to recognize how
Yeah.
basically he has been blacking out
Yeah.
to cope,
Yeah.
he can't put the brakes on because what
Mhm.
he's created is too big
Right. And
and
it's
it's no longer his goal. It's
right,
too
and it's
late.
also interesting how many other lost people he's found in this
Yeah,
process, so
absolutely. They're just willing to come along.
right.
Um, Yeah, and so kind of at the end, not at kind of, at the
Uh,
end, I mean, basically he's confronting having to kill himself to
mhm.
try to also kill Tyler
Right.
to stop all this. So he's willing to destroy himself completely at the end.
Mhm.
So it's kind of thinking about this idea of like having to burn something down before you can start over with your eyes open. And I
Uh-huh.
kind of wonder what you think about that idea or concept.
Well, I feel like they tried to do that with him and then what was happening in the outside world, right?
Yeah.
As he's
Oh,
literally,
that's a good point.
like, watching
The bombs go
all
off.
the bombs go off because he can't stop it now, right?
Right.
And they're just holding hands, and he's just watching and, like, what's supposed to be a reset of
Yeah.
consumerism.
Right.
Right? So that was their whole message of, like,
Yeah.
and there was, like, a Starbucks cup theme throughout the movie, and, like,
Yes.
the ultimate thing of capitalism, right? They
Yes.
may have had an Amazon or, like, an
If
Apple.
you could do it now,
Yeah,
right? Everyone
in
would
the
have an
whole thing.
iPhone.
Right, yeah, just something in there. But literally, it's like him shooting himself,
Yeah.
like, as the world is burning around him.
Yep. And I guess we're supposed to take it as he
Mhm.
destroys Tyler
Right,
and now is really himself with his full awareness
of what's
for
happening.
whatever's gonna come next. Like, he's
Well,
present now.
yeah, and it's
Mhm.
also interesting, just we talked a little bit about Joker, and then you look at, like, the Heath Ledger Joker,
Yeah.
where they're like, some people are just here to watch the world burn,
Right.
right?
Right.
But in this case, I feel like this character was actually trying to help.
I do think it started from a
Mhm.
place of a solution
Mhm.
and just kind of morphed.
Yeah.
Which was one of my next questions. So Project Mayhem, we could argue maybe
Mhm.
started as like individual awakening and
Yeah.
morphs into groupthink almost instantly.
Yes.
And so at what point do you think a liberation movement stops being about freedom and actually becomes about control?
To be honest, I feel like it's stopped right away.
Yeah.
Like, as soon those people just waiting outside to get in when they basically I think for them, as soon as they shave their head.
Yeah.
Nothing okay, again, it's nothing against people who serve in the military.
Right.
I appreciate the freedoms that that has bought me.
Sure.
And you expect people in the military to have to just follow orders. But it's that almost that symbolic thing of, like, the head shaving that happens when
Yes.
you go into, like, basic training.
Yep.
It felt like the first guy when they finally got like, they broke him
Yes.
and then he shaves his head. I was
Yes.
like, "Oh, shit." Even
Yeah.
when I was watching the movie, I'm like, "This shit is on,"
Mhm.
like, and then there's the next couple guys waiting outside to do the same thing. So I feel like it's not so much about saving that person because you just took their individuality.
Well, I think you really nailed it because you can also criticize any sort of military structure
Mhm.
when it creates a system that people can no longer speak up and have to fall in line. I mean, i.e.,
Yeah.
Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, like we've seen the ramification of that
Mhm.
same groupthink and mindset of just
Right.
like you become part of this larger thing that you
Mhm.
lose yourself and could end up doing something absolutely terrible.
Uh-huh.
And that happens all the time. I mean, look at how gang culture works, right?
Yeah.
Like most people who enter into a gang are searching for connection, community, to be
Uh-huh.
seen,
Right.
and very quickly becomes dangerous. And
Mhm.
again, if you can't be a person anymore or speak up because you have this like ultimate hierarchy of control and it's the gang or the group over
Mhm.
everything, you're
Right.
probably going to do some really fucked up things.
And blame it on that.
Absolutely. Or
And
just not even blame it on anything because it's just the way we operate.
you don't even think about the consequences of
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just thinking about that even for, like, people who've gone into, like, cults or things
Same.
like that.
Yeah.
Because I had one friend that we were talking about something, and she was talking about this group, and then she started using the "we" instead of "I,"
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, shit."
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "That's a dangerous slope right there.
Yep.
You lost your individuality."
Absolutely.
And so I feel like as soon as that happened,
Yeah.
so the hard part is you weigh that with, like, a military thing, right? You need
Sure.
soldiers to follow orders, but where you see all those tragedies happen is when nobody questions.
Exactly.
You know, like,
Yep.
why are we doing this?
Exactly.
Why are
Or
we killing these
are we
innocent
allowed
people?
to question anymore?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or will I actually be exiled or in trouble if
Right.
I'm the one that's trying to go against
Mhm.
the larger group?
And that is my issue with military things,
Yeah.
is that I do feel like someone you should be,
Absolutely. And again, current times, we're seeing a lot of things that
Mhm.
from the outside we're questioning, and it just
Right.
seems like you either have to be for it or against it.
Yeah.
There couldn't possibly be any other shades of gray in there.
Right. And
And
that's
that's very dangerous.
right. And that's unfortunately why we can't have discussions.
Right. Right. We've lost a lot of that. It's like
Mhm.
us versus them or you versus me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we just miss so much.
Right.
So I guess going back to some of like your impressions, walk me back into the moment. I guess you knew this going into it, but when you really saw it play out, that you learned that Tyler
Uh-huh.
wasn't who you thought he was. How
Right.
did you feel? What did you notice? What was it like to maybe even see it come alive on screen? Because you knew conceptually, just like
Uh-huh.
what came up for you.
And I think probably because I knew I did start to watch the movie to see if there was those
Mm,
moments. Like,
yeah,
is there moments when it's like mostly Edward Norton sees Bradford, or
sure.
is it like, are them separate or
Yeah,
whatever, you know? So I think I was trying to watch for if there had been clues,
sure.
but then I think for me, it was more just watching his realization,
Yeah,
versus like,
your own.
yeah, because I was like, I think for me, that was what it was of his moment of like, oh crap.
Yeah,
I have created this.
right,
This is me,
right.
right?
Like really having to confront
Mhm.
himself and what he has been capable of.
But he's also been chasing himself through
Yeah,
the whole movie,
yeah,
wanting acceptance
yes,
and from himself.
yep, 100%.
And I also found it interesting. He found that book in the beginning where he would be
Mhm.
like Jack's liver, Jack's duodenum, whatever.
Yeah,
And he would say it occasionally throughout the movie, like
right.
Jack's broken heart, Jack's whatever.
Yeah,
And so I feel like Edward Norton always just felt like never felt whole.
yeah,
He always felt like a part.
yes,
And then he was always chasing self acceptance.
yeah.
And
I think that makes total sense.
and again, it's that whole thing. We learn to love ourselves and yada yada yada. But like again, it's not a downplay of that. But again, I think because he couldn't accept himself, he created this persona
Oh, for
of
sure.
what he wanted to be. But even
Absolutely.
that persona rejected him,
Yes.
which is interesting.
When I guess it gets really trippy too if we're thinking about it like he builds up this, say, part of himself
Mhm.
to be larger than life and its own person.
Right.
And then when he finally has to confront it, I don't know that he likes what he sees.
Yeah.
Right. And so there
Uh-huh.
is this sort of like meta psychological part of like, once I actually confront this other part of myself,
Mhm.
do I want to keep it or do I need to destroy it?
Right.
Because it's destroying me
Right.
in the long run.
And it's also he's watching what it has created,
Yes.
right? Like
100%.
he thought he was making a thing better because
Right.
he's made this powerful
Yes.
man essentially. And, now and then you have to be like, "Oh, this I don't want this. I need to
Right.
get rid of this to be better."
Because really, I've like lost myself in the
Mhm.
process of this creation that
Right.
I thought was going to answer all my problems.
Mhm.
And now I have very different new problems
Right,
to
and I find
contend
it
with.
so interesting, like, he blew up his own apartment, like, or his own thing and
I
all of his
know.
stuff, right? So he did make
Yeah.
these big statements,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Where he was smart is so interesting that he set the stage, right? He put
Yeah.
the thing in his own lock of
Yep.
the oven and then
Yeah.
went on a trip
Yep.
to come back and his crap had blown up and again,
And he's just kind of like, whoops, how did that happen?
yeah, and has, like, locked that away, like, he didn't remember doing it.
Right.
And also without consequence of what that could have done to other people.
Well, and that's why I think it's interesting too, is like there is that line throughout, fine line that we're kind of skirting throughout the whole movie is again, I don't know how many people are killed.
Yeah.
We're not really talking about
Uh-huh.
that. I mean, obviously Meatloaf, but I mean
Right.
specifically from the narrator, Tyler Durden's actions. Because
Yeah.
even with the explosions at the end, it's just the end.
Right.
And I'm assuming we're supposed to think that because it's like late night, early morning, these
Maybe
buildings are
more.
mostly
Yeah.
abandoned and it's more like a statement.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of reminds me like these are my biggest criticisms about Marvel is like if you're
Uh-huh.
fighting and blowing up buildings, like
Mhm.
debris is falling and
Yeah.
like I just don't know that there were no innocent bystanders killed when he blew up his
Mhm.
apartment or when they blew up all the buildings in the financial district.
They
It's
have
just not important to the story.
Well, they had a whole TV show that used to show the people who had to clean up all the
Yeah.
shit and, like, find you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that had to do that, but, yeah, and again, I think it was they were trying to make the point, right, of,
Right.
like, they were just trying to blow up this ball that would roll into this thing, and,
Right.
nobody was supposed to get hurt when, like, Meatloaf got shot.
Right.
And he's like, "You're literally wearing ski masks at night, like, doing terrible things. Like,
Right.
why are you thinking of it?" So, I think it was trying to minimize the
Mhm.
collateral damage, but you knew they were gonna sneak a
There
whether
has
it's
to be.
someone, like, cleaning the offices
That's what I
or
think. Security.
Yeah,
Like, if there's security at the front desk and the whole
right.
building collapses on them, like, you can't
Mhm.
imagine there's no loss.
Well, and in the book, when I read about the difference of the ending,
Oh, right.
the building was supposed to collapse the way he had planned Tyler had planned it,
Yeah.
is it was supposed to collapse over a library, which is interesting that he would
That
take out a
is
library,
fascinating.
and
Yeah.
he was supposed to die in it as some type of martyr statement.
Fascinating. It makes me really wanna read the book.
Yeah, so I was like, "Okay,"
Very interesting
but then
difference
it
that they
didn't
went that way. Yeah.
yeah, it didn't happen that way, so I just thought I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. So how did you feel when it all wrapped up? Like, were you noticing that you felt
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more, like, exhilarated or sympathetic or implicated or even just, like, really unsettled?
And again, I have to say I had to pause the movie during parts, not maybe to the
Yeah.
extent of Rosie O'Donnell necessarily, but sometimes I was like, "Oh, icky."
Yeah.
There were icky feelings
Sure.
through this. So when it got done, I kinda was like, huh. Because again, I knew he would figure out he was Tyler,
Right.
but I didn't know how then it was gonna end after that. So
Sure.
when it wrapped up, I was like, "Did this just give us, like, a happy ending?" You know what I mean? Because he's,
Right.
like,
What do we make of this
holding
conclusion?
hands with Helen Bonham Carter,
Yeah.
and they're like, everything and it could be, like, almost like they try to do a fake romance movie, you know what I mean? Where it ends and there's
Interesting.
fireworks and shit, they're holding
Yeah.
hands. I'm like,
And his face is, like, hanging off because he just shot
they
his
shot his jaw,
head.
and
It's
he's
so
like,
bizarre.
"I'm okay." I'm like, "You're not okay.
Right.
You need a lot of help."
Absolutely.
Right? And that's my thing was is that was finishing, I was like, those 2 characters are clearly very destructive and attention seeking,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
are they actually going to get help or just continue this destructive back and forth relationship?
I think that's a good point too. I don't know that I've ever sat and thought of as much about like what happens next.
Mhm.
I guess the way I made sense of it was that I think it subverted, at least for the time, some expectations of like where it was going to go. Right.
Right.
Because the chaos was building, the chaos was building. We get this
Uh-huh.
giant reveal.
Right.
He tries to stop the train that it's already too
Mhm.
far down the tracks. And so the only way to stop it is to at least end Tyler. Even though
Yeah.
we can't end the consequences of what
Already
Tyler,
done.
narrator, had already
Mhm.
set into place. So to me, I think I was probably always leaning more into that satire of like
Uh-huh.
he got himself back.
Right.
At the ramifications, we can't even comprehend what they're going to be yet.
Right. So for me, when it ended, I was like, "Okay, but, like, there's still really I mean, I felt a little sense of peace of, like,
Yeah.
okay, he got rid of that part, but you're still pretty messed up. Like,
Oh,
are
a
you
thousand
are
percent.
you gonna actually do something about this, Or
Yeah, that's a great question.
are you gonna find some other way and it was also interesting, like, Helena Bonham Carter, like, I love her as
Y-
an actress, just as a side note, and I totally again, this was one of those movies where I'm like, "I forgot all these people were in this."
So many people. It's like
Yeah.
stacked.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, I forgot she's such a great actress." Not
Absolutely.
that I forget, but I was like, "Oh my gosh," but, um, her character, like, how
Yes.
much, like, she missed when he wasn't at the groups, like, almost part of her thing was that
Yeah.
antagonism
Yeah.
with him, but
Yes.
also that, like, weird attraction.
Yes, and I think I interpreted a little bit like they saw similarities in each other,
Mhm.
and so I was wondering too, like, and I don't have an answer for this. I wasn't sure if Edward Norton didn't like Marla being there because it took away from his thing as much
Uh-huh.
as he didn't like someone finally seeing him,
Right,
even though what he wanted was to be seen.
right, but maybe not putting the mirror up and
Correct.
showing him what he was.
Correct. That's
Right.
how I've always read it,
Mhm.
was that this sort of push-pull attraction with Marla was like,
Uh-huh.
wow, finally somebody actually sees me for all my, you could say, brokenness,
Yeah.
right? And that's threatening.
Right.
So this like split part of my personality has to connect with her
Uh-huh.
because I can't contain it or process it or tolerate it. Even though deep down, I think what the ending is telling us is like, that's really what he wanted all along, even though
Right.
I wouldn't champion her as like the ideal character to do that.
Right.
I think you could make an argument that her brokenness allows her to accept his brokenness.
Right. Because they're basically essentially very similar.
Yeah, they're just so messed up, like
Uh-huh.
like you said too. But I
Right.
do think there's this interesting piece of like, because he's so just emotionally unwell, like she
Mhm.
presents a mirror to him in a way that could
Right.
be very cathartic and healing, but he
Mhm.
has to use his split personality basically to interact with her because
Right.
he can't tolerate it himself.
And that is it. Because when he first confronts her at one of the meetings,
Yes.
and he's like, "I'm gonna turn you in basically for
Yeah.
faking."
Yeah.
And she's like, "I'll turn you in."
Right.
Like you're doing the same thing. And they have to
Exactly.
split what days they
Which
could go to
groups
the
they
meeting.
go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting.
Mhm.
And then just I don't know how each of them kind of does their thing. But that is a very interesting point that he couldn't handle that, even though he did want to connect. So he
Right.
used his other part of his personality to do it.
Yeah, because I remember, like,
Mhm.
trying to make sense of it
Mhm.
when I had first seen it and had the reveal of, like, so if Tyler was in the sexual relationship with Marla, it was really Edward Norton the whole time.
Right.
If he had to become Tyler, maybe to think he could,
Right.
like, be again that sort of, like, hypersexualized, have the prowess, be able to satisfy her. It's, like, a
Right.
very interesting, again, like, meta psychology of she's still choosing him.
Right.
It's almost like he doesn't think he can be him with her.
Well, and then it was that weird dynamic that you would see where he would almost be jealous
Right,
of like his other personality, but
right.
also jealous of her,
Yes.
taking away from his relationship with his other
Right.
personality. And then he would almost have the Tyler character telling him to tell her to go away.
Yeah, because she's the threat.
Yeah.
And so I guess the way I made sense of the ending was, like, maybe the happy ending part of it
Mhm.
was at least Edward Norton, Tyler, the narrator, integrated back into one person,
Right.
and he was present. So, if, like,
Yeah.
nothing else,
Yeah.
he gains a sense of being present with
Mhm.
her and the
Right.
consequences of his actions where he
Mhm.
doesn't have to battle himself
Right.
anymore. I mean, he's
Uh-huh.
literally killed the Tyler part of himself, um, and just kind of be there.
Right.
So it's like a very dark, happy ending. If the happy is like
Yeah.
he's reintegrated into his personhood.
Well, and that's a little bit when I was reading, like, about, like, the ending for the novel,
Mm,
about just, like, that, like, it was almost like he had this, like because they consider the movie the happier ending.
that I guess that would make sense from him
Right.
being institutionalized.
Right,
Yeah.
versus him still being like, "Oh, no," and then realizing Tyler might still be lurking.
Right. Like not having that awareness still. He's
Mhm.
still fractured.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. All right. So, man, we've had some amazing conversations. So, I have a few more as we're winding down. Did you have anything just in notes or that you wanted to touch on specifically?
I have to give Edward Norton credit
Yeah.
with that. Like, again, it was like prime Brad Pitt moment, but like
Right.
again, and then it's also interesting. I didn't like a lot of the Hulk movies before
Oh,
Mark
yeah.
Ruffalo, but then Edward Norton going on to play the Hulk
Yeah.
is kind of an interesting thing
That's a
to
good
think
point.
about
Yeah.
because he also plays a fractured
Yeah.
creature, essentially,
Yes.
or
That's a great
person
point. Yeah.
who then literally has a rage monster inside. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, look at you," like
That's such a good parallel. I love that.
part 2, you've already done this, like
And you get to be a hero of sorts,
yeah,
right?
and now you
Yeah.
get to do this whole thing so
Yeah.
I guess I was when he was, like, doing the whole thing and I knew that he was actually also Brad Pitt, I was like, "Oh, you've already done it as the Hulk."
That's such
Or, like,
a
later
great
you go on to play
callback.
yeah,
Yeah.
so anyway, that's my just little sarcastic
I love that
comment.
though. And I think that they're all phenomenal in all the roles in this movie.
Yeah.
Especially again, I'm sad you didn't never got to see it not
Mhm.
knowing, but
Right.
I think it just landed so well of like these distinct
Mhm.
people with these distinct personalities and roles and the challenges and then that like
Yeah.
light bulb moment of these
Mhm.
are again just like fractured versions of him and
Right.
him trying his best to feel
Yeah.
something and to come out the other side was
Uh-huh.
so interesting. Let's see. I think actually we hit most of the things. think that we did such a great part
Uh-huh.
a great
Just
job at this.
dissected it so much.
Yes. I guess so maybe kind of bringing it all together, is there anything you think you would have really understood differently if you had seen this much younger? So
Mhm.
A, and without the twist, B.
And again, I wish I could have seen it without the twist or
Yeah,
without knowing. I am the person who will, like, if someone runs into the movie, I'm like, oh, whatever. And I
sure,
think in this movie, because I wasn't as excited to see it, I just
sure.
never put in the time.
Yeah.
But for a lot of things, I'm fine if my friends ruin the ending and then I go in and still see them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for this, if I had actually probably seen it when it came out, there is a part of me who wonders if maybe I would have had like not as skeptical an eye.
Sure. Yeah.
Because now I think with the times that we're in, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Ugh, toxic masculinity." I
Yeah.
I kinda had
Totally
to, like
fair.
I had to pause and be like,
Yeah.
"Just watch it objectively. Stop judging,
Sure.
stop
Sure.
getting annoyed at Edward Norton.
Yeah.
Everybody's got problems, like, call me your
Try to
shit."
like rile up some empathy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think when I first started, I was like, "Oh, God," like
That's totally fair.
which I know sounds silly, and I was like, "Where do we get to the fighting?" Like, when is this? But, again, I think they did a good job portraying just that mindless
Yeah.
thing that I feel like probably most people feel like they're in.
I do think that's a fair observation is
Mhm,
like it's hard not to feel averse to something that looks like it's glamorizing this with
mhm,
everything going on. I think it helps to be curious and try to
mhm,
lean into it. And I do think you really walked away with that clear understanding of the satirization.
mhm.
Um but yeah, it's tough to kind of champion a movie that seems on the surface like just completely pro the most toxic aspects of being a man. So
Well,
fair.
and then part of me thinks maybe younger me wouldn't have gotten all the things.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have figured some things out, but I feel like
Yeah.
I guess on some level, because then there's a part of me that feels like for a while it was all about like there was a whole thing of men getting in touch with their feelings, and then I
Sure.
feel like then now there's been the backlash of toxic
Right.
masculinity,
Right.
and so I was like, where does this movie kind of fit in with that timeline?
Fair.
With
Yeah.
that, because so would younger me have appreciated, or
Mhm.
for me looking back, this almost like the satire of this, like here's
Yeah.
what this is, but this isn't helping anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point because all I really remember, and I know
Mhm.
we already talked about this, was I was more just sucked into the ride
Mhm.
and the mind-blowing moment of like, "Whoa," and then wanting to
Mhm.
go back and rewatch it for the
Uh-huh.
Easter eggs. I
Right.
don't know that I was quite at the age or the self-awareness to want to dissect it that way.
Mhm.
I just kind of similar to Sixth Sense,
Right.
loved being surprised.
Right.
And even Sixth Sense I rewatched recently, which hopefully I could do an episode of that if
Yeah.
someone hasn't
Uh-huh.
seen it, and it hit me so different now as an
Uh-huh.
adult of the unprocessed grief and,
Yeah.
like, this young boy and how scared he is in his relationship with his mom and, like, being so othered and outside of all of his friends. And I just remember I probably watched it a couple years ago and just
Uh-huh.
sobbing. And I didn't
Yeah.
cry when I saw Sixth Sense the
Yeah.
movie when I was young. I just
Mhm.
again walked out like, "Whoa, how did he write
Right.
this? How did we not see this coming?" Like,
Mhm.
and I think in my memory that's how I felt about Fight Club until probably the
Right.
last because I've watched it many, many times. I
Mhm.
think I watched it again last year just because I was like, "Oh, I have it. I have DVDs. I love
Right.
all my like
I'm not gonna judge, so do I.
tangible media." Yeah. So I had just like popped it in, hadn't seen it in a minute, and it was I think it does hit different now
Mhm.
because of context.
Right.
You're like, "Oh, I don't know if this is pro or anti or if
Yeah.
does that make me pro or anti?"
Mhm.
Like, it's just, I think, neat to look at it at different stages.
Right,
Yeah.
and again, that's why I'm like, I'm on a level I feel like maybe it's okay that I saw it now because I don't know if
Yeah.
younger me would have got the things, and
Yeah.
then maybe I'd been like, "Oh, I've already seen that movie," or whatever,
Sure.
So looking back at it now, although I do have to point out the irony of him, like, making copies of the rules, so, like, I we don't talk about Fight Club, I'm like, "Well,
At
we
his
probably."
job.
Yeah, we probably don't make copies on the copy machine either,
Yeah.
So there was just little weird humor things
Yes.
throughout, like, that I thought was funny, and then also, again, as he is when he just starts just first hanging out with Tyler, a
Yeah.
lot of the things they're doing are sort of like that juvenile delinquent stuff
Yeah, it's almost like he's a younger version of himself.
that he maybe never got to be.
I think that's a great point. It's almost like a regression conversation
Yeah.
too.
It sounds like dad left.
Yeah.
He had to grow up. He did all the things because you heard it when he had the conversation where he's like, "I went to college.
Yeah.
I did this,
I got a good job.
Yeah, but
I
I'm
got
not
my own place.
I'm not fulfilled." He was like, "You should get married, but I don't wanna get married." You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I feel like, especially now, because I feel like there was always the pressure, like, you got to go to college, you got to get a job, you got to get married, you have to
Yeah.
have kids. Whereas I feel like now people have more freedom of choice with that a little bit,
Yeah.
and a little less drama about being like, why don't you have all these things?
Well, because I think probably to your point, like there's a lot of previous decades now where
Mhm.
people have done that and are contending with, I don't know that it was really all it was cracked up to be.
Right.
So that the younger generations are maybe taking a step back and saying, like, well, I've seen, my parents or my older siblings or my aunts, my uncles, like people in
Mhm.
my sphere. So how are they going to sell it to me when I'm seeing their, again, lack of happiness, lack of satisfaction? Like, I
Right.
don't know that that's the blueprint I need to follow when I'm not seeing a lot of evidence that it works.
Right. So for him, I feel like when I watched it, it was like he almost went back to have the joy that he didn't get to have as a kid.
Yeah,
And then it spiraled because then it just kind
quickly.
of built if this would be that toxic masculinity
Yeah,
teenager
yeah,
going forward.
yeah. All great, great observations.
Oh.
I love it. So, okay, as we're winding down, if you flash forward a week from now, what image or moment from this film do you think might live rent free in your head
Um I'm trying to, again, the epic scene of them holding hands as stuff is
Yeah.
exploding is,
at the end?
yeah,
Yeah.
is probably, um, to be honest, I'm also like, him, Meatloaf holding him on his breast while he cries. I'm like, oh, well, you won't be able to get that out of your head
Yes,
for a
yes. I can
while.
immediately conjure it up in my brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, that one, because it happened so many times. Like, again,
Yeah.
back to I mean, again, I think it is just, I have to give it an iconic movie ending.
Yes.
Holding hands with Helena Bonham Carter, shit's
Yes.
exploding.
Yes.
He's tried to reintegrate himself. He's tried to kill off, like, what you can, like, the bad character.
Yeah.
And who knows where we head from here.
Yeah. I agree. I think that scene is just inseparable from the movie as a
Yeah.
whole. And I even had looked up the song that plays
Yeah.
because
Uh-huh.
I don't hear that song very often. It's not super popular now. There's no way I could ever hear that song and not think of that scene.
Right.
Like they are just married
Mhm.
forever because it was quite a roller coaster of a movie. So like as it's
Yeah.
ending and you're seeing this and you're hearing the like very bizarre ethereal type
Hmm.
vocals,
Right.
um, it's pretty iconic.
Yeah.
Like you're just kind of like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah, because you're like, "What do you mean he," if you hadn't
Yeah,
known, you would be like, "What do you mean that he's actually Brad Pitt?"
right.
Right? And then you're like,
You're still processing it.
and then it stops exploding, and so I
Yeah.
feel like that would probably be that scene because although I'm skeptical, there's a
Yep.
part of me that hopes.
Yeah, I like that piece too, though. Like maybe
So,
now he can do something with this information.
right.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Okay, so one other way that I've been ending all the episodes is I'm asking people what's a movie that like you love, love, love that maybe I haven't seen, and I'm making a list.
Oh, I mean, well, to be honest, I guess I could be like, "You should watch To All the Boys I Love Before,"
I was
but
gonna say you threw that out, and I don't know that one, so I would be open.
I mean, it's super okay, I'm gonna preface with it's super cheesy. It's
Okay.
like chick flicky girl thing,
Okay.
whatever, based off in a young adult book,
Oh, got it.
right?
The YA, yeah.
It's a YA. But it has spawned like a TV series
Oh
off of
wow! How have I missed
one of the
this?
other
Yeah.
characters that's now had 3 seasons, and some of the original
I'm
movie characters are
behind.
making appearances.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those, like, even in some other shows, they like pull this in. So I guess
Yeah.
on a level, it's one of those like fake dating relationship things that it
Huh.
had 2 sequels and it's like a whole thing. But if you want just a little feel good
Sure.
movie, like, as silly as it sounds, something maybe complete opposite end of the spectrum from Fight Club.
I am open.
Yeah. And you
Okay.
could be watching it and be like, what? This is, So if you want something less horror heavy that you can probably predict how it will end,
Just go with it.
just go with it. Appreciate the cheese ball
Okay.
of all the things and, and the references. And then when he's like, we need to watch Fight Club, you know what I mean?
I love it. Okay. Sold. All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, tell everybody where they can find you, your podcast, if you've got handles you want them to jump on.
Yeah. So again, under my physical therapy, it's Better Fit Therapy. So if you follow that online, and then that has a link to my podcast that's also on
Awesome.
Spotify, which is The State of Healthcare. And then also, if you want, on a personal note, then if you want to see my aerial adventures and all the things I like to eat and pictures of my cats, you can find me at AZ Cupcake Girls. But yeah, check out the podcast and see all the other things. And which is, I love my podcast, but it's a little bit more like, I'm like, maybe not as fun. I was really enjoying watching the movie, but I really appreciate all the people that have come on and taken the time
Yeah,
for me.
that's so
So
cool. Well, and I would love to come in and crash your site too,
yeah,
like,
so look for,
learn more
you might
about
be
it.
on mine shortly. So
Yeah,
yay.
I think that would be a blast. So thanks for hanging out with me again. Hopefully you watched Fight Club before you listened to this episode. We're not responsible for spoiling it
Rosie
for
O'Donnell
anybody.
style.
Yeah, oh my gosh. But yeah, you can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and YouTube, at Scene Interpretation Pod on IG, at Dr. Sophia Murphy on IG. Please like, subscribe, leave some comments. And really, honestly, like, I think we got into some awesome content. So I would love to hear what landed with people, what didn't. And hopefully you're just enjoying me hanging out with cool people, having cool
Watching fun movies.
conversations. Yeah. Well, until next time, bye.
Thanks.